Conquering Mega Eagle. How you doing, folks? Good afternoon, good morning, or whatever it is. Things are incredibly bloody hectic at the minute. Mrs. is just dropped a new child out of her. I bought her a new motor, you know, nice Mercedes Vito. It was very cheap, and as a result of that, I've got a lot of work to do on it. Still working on a house. It's coming up to winter. You know, it's creeping along, and I need to get guttering up and that. Still haven't done all that. Yeah, all these things. And on top of that, you know, I'm pretty much self-employed now, like with my aeroplane work and that, working out the back of my car, truck, whatever. Slightly more professional than doing it out of a car. And what? What am I saying? Oh yeah. I'm starting to get, you know, people ask me to do component work, and I've got nowhere to do it. So I figured, you know, I really need to sort this shed out so I can bring little bits and bobs back here and fix them, and then, you know, put them back on airplanes wherever the airplane is. You know. So I've been having a big tidy up, and hopefully a few of you will recognise the deluxe aluminium melting pot. I was going to throw this out because it's no longer really usable, and the whole point of this video is just to have a little look at before I ditch it, because a few of you have been very interested in it, and I think it's a nice way of doing things. But you know, there's some things that I got right and some things that I got wrong, so we'll have a little go through it, and then perhaps have a little think about, you know, the next one, its replacement, as it were. Yeah, because I will have to make another one because it's been very useful, but it won't be the same. So obviously I'll leave a link to that video if you're completely unfamiliar with it. Like, look up here or something. What about now? And I'll put a link there. Maybe have a look at that first or whatever. But whatever, it's pretty straightforward. Anyway. So it consists of an old fire extinguisher with a very heavy wall thick stainless pipe going down to the bottom. Pipe's capped off. Electric oven cooker element wrapped around that, and then my homemade castable refractory installation separating the two, fire extinguisher and the stainless steel pipe, and then the whole thing's powered by a Inkbird PID temperature controller, and that side of it worked very well. So its ultimate mode of failure is my homemade castable refractory has failed, and you know, as you can see from this isn't high temperature paint, so it's cooked off where it's got hot. Basically my refractory consisted of perlite mixed with fire clay, yeah, and I packed it down. And it's worked, you know, considering this has got up to like 750 degrees inside, and there's less than 2 inches of insulation, and this isn't high temperature paint. It's only just cooked off recently when the sort of insulation started degrading and dropping out. You can see at the top here, I mean the top end doesn't even really get that hot, but it's all just falling out, and you know, that'll then fall into my cast. But hey, that's by the by. I could quite easily rebuild this with a different insulation media, you know, maybe the ceramic blanket or something like that, and it'd be a lot better. But there's other things that I would have done differently. So first off, the whole point of a melting pot is that you don't have a separate crucible and foundry. You know, I can plug this into the wall, and then using the handle just pour it straight into my mould, and that's been really good. It's a much safer way of doing things, and because you ain't got to juggle around with tongs and that, and you know, with crucibles, if you accidentally put the crucible on something that isn't even, and you know, it'll fall over, and if you put it on something that isn't capable of taking the heat like concrete, if the concrete is all damp and that, I've put crucibles down on, or even hot metal and that on concrete, not realised it's a touch damp. Even in the shed, like just a bit of water, moisture, or whatever. If I've spilt some moisture there, or it's got under the door or something, it'll pop, you know, and yeah, really give you a bit of a fright, I suppose. So I think it's a lot safer. What else? It's smaller, it's more compact as well, isn't it? But it has its downfalls as well. Like, it means having an integral crucible, which is really the main downfall of this machine. Apart from the insulation falling out, what's happened with the crucible itself, the chamber where I put the metal, can't really call it a crucible because it's not. It's stainless steel, so you know I must have done 2 dozen or so big pours with this, and you know eventually even stainless gets degraded by the molten aluminium, because the stainless itself is getting hotter than the aluminium, so that's a rosy red, almost white heat sometimes, and the problem with that is that you end up with it sort of self-generates slag. So however well I clean this out, I can never get rid of all the slag out the bottom, and that's towards the end of this thing's life. It's been starting to get into the casting, so I've noticed a slow, you know, degradation of the quality of the castings. They've been getting more crystalline, more voids in them, and that, and I think that's down to the what do you call it? Down to the stainless degrading at the bottom of the pot. Other just general faults with this machine. The temperature control side of things has been great. I would have another different plug in it. I just used whatever I had at the time. This is a, you know, you like the power supply socket on the back of your PC, I suppose. So it's a 20 amp supply, and I can't put any more than 13 amps out of my wall socket. So, and the element in this one is only 1200 watt, which is, you know, not that much at all, and it's pretty impressive that I'm able to melt a fairly sizable quantity of aluminium with this. I reckon I can get 3/4 of a litre, or like, you know, molten with this, which is pretty cool. I've been able to do some fairly big castings because the element only goes up about halfway. It does take, if I fill past the element, it can get molten metal right to the top of the insulation, I suppose, but it's taking a very, very long time to do that. So the size of it and the weight, that's yeah, I'm not the strongest bloke in the world, but I haven't got little Miss Daisy arms, and it is just about at a point where I'm going to struggle to lift it. Had I realised that the insulation was going to work as well as it had done, I would have moved the handle much closer in, and I could have still done that if I was that bothered, because it's just on coach bolts welded to the side there, so I could have just spun the nuts in and that. You know, it was manageable. It was manageable. Like getting on towards being a bit of a handful when it was full. Messy. I didn't have these wires tidied up too well, but you know, that's never caused me any problems. The temperature probe. That's welded right. I mean, the nut for the socket that the temperature probe sits in is welded straight to the bottom of the pipe, the molten metal pipe, and that should have given me an accurate reading. But it still is like 70 degrees out or so. You know, it starts melting the alley, and this probe's reading sort of 620 or something like that, and really you'd expect it to be like well past that, because that's reading the temperature of the pipe, not the metal inside. But I could have just calibrated this probe, but you know, once I'd done the first couple of melts and that was stuck in my head, it never even mattered after that, because It's been the only thing I've been using to melt aluminium since building it, and so it's quite easy to remember that. But the whole point of using a separate PRD was that my original intention was that I could build a couple of different size melting pots, and that's probably what I'm going to do in the future. But we'll get on to that. The legs on this were stupid. They're probably one of the most dangerous aspects of the whole thing. They didn't have to be that tall, so I could have done them a lot lower. Really only need to be about an inch off the ground, because, like I say, this insulation, when it was working very well. So that could have been a lot lower. You know, there's a couple of times I nearly kicked this over. I never have done, but you know, I came close. Especially seeing as though there's wires coming out of it. You know, walking past it, like getting ready to do a pour and that, and one of us sort of causing an aluminium volcano in the middle of the shed, which wouldn't be great. But what else? Yeah. So you'll notice this pipe is about a foot long, 300 mil, and I think that's 4 inch, or just under, probably 80 mil, 3 3/4, something like that, I suppose. More than that. Let's get a tape. Let's measure it. 3.5 or 85. Yeah. And the whole point of this was that using a small diameter long pipe to get a specific volume, as opposed to using a short dumpy pipe, you know, something fatter and shorter, was that I'd have more surface area available to wrap the heater element round. But as it happened, I you know, wound the element up tight, and it only reached about halfway up, and I could have used a longer one, but I just went with this in the end. And so I haven't really gained that much from using such a long chamber. I can shove it full if I want to, and it will eventually melt it all. But in practice, I would have been much better off. There's only been a couple of times where I've needed that much metal in one go. So in practice, I would have been much better off having the pipe a lot shorter. And definitely, it's been so annoying having to cut everything down to below 80 mil just to fit it in the pipe. Yeah. So you know, if I don't put too much material in, it'll melt it fairly quickly, which is the bonus of having that surface area there. But at the same time, the penalty is having to cut down your scrap into very small pieces in order to fit it in. So future, I'll probably go somewhere in the middle, go, you know, over 100 mil, 4 inches, something like that, just so it makes all the difference. And you know, you don't know how annoying it is when you got to get so many things ready to cast. Like, the last thing you want to do is start plopping bits of metal in, and then, you know, nice big bit won't quite go in, and you have a grinder or a hammer or whatever smashing it into bits just so it can fit in. So it's a real benefit. Like, you know, sort of thing I've really come to appreciate is the bigger the opening in the top, you know, the happier you're going to be. But at the same time, it's not going to pour quite so well, is it, if you've got a really big opening there? And like this, with it long and narrow, I can get it right over the mould before it starts pouring, which is where I probably, like, rather than going really fat and shallow, I'll go somewhere in the middle with the next one. So around about 4 inches, I reckon, for me, is going to be a happy spot, and a lot shorter. Yeah. It's, you know, the other thing to bear in mind, I had a lid for it. I never bothered insulating the lid. It always worked fine. It was just the other end of the fire extinguisher. I've already thrown that out because it got in the way. What else are we on about? Yeah, the ability to replace the pipe. Yeah, so if I figure out a way of doing this while being able to replace the pipe, that'll be the real key. It doesn't have to be too quick to replace it, but I want to be able to do it so I don't have to repack all the insulation and all that crap. I just want to be able to, you know, maybe undo one bolt at the bottom with a, you know, the securing the pipe, and knock it out or whatever, pull it out, It does want to be a tight fit against the element, so maybe the element's going to have to be wound up against a slightly larger diameter piece of steel, and then this one can slide inside, and then as soon as it starts getting crappy, I can just swap it out with another one. So that'd be a really big improvement. Obviously there's going to be a weight penalty to that, so another reason for making this whole thing a bit smaller. What else? Yeah, so I mean the thing in the future, I'd probably make two, to be honest. I'd make one with one element and another much bigger one with two elements. These controllers are so cheap, and it'd just be a lot tidier if it was all built into the same pot. But you know, whilst this doesn't get so hot that it's unpleasant to be around, I'm not sure if I should mount the controller onto it, because it'll probably get too hot for the controller. So that'll be one of the things I look at, but maybe not change. I might just stick with this box. I'd have to upgrade for a larger pot that uses two elements. I'd have to upgrade my relay in here, I think, because I can't remember what I used, but it certainly wasn't, you know, capable of running 3 kilowatt. I think it was a smaller one that was sort of 2.2 or something like that. And so, you know, you really want your relay being rated twice what it's actually going to run, I suppose. Otherwise it will just be forever burning out, and that will get tedious after a while. So that's what we're looking at for future projects. Perhaps two of them, one much more compact that'll hopefully be even easier to pour, and one that's bigger. And the other thing I want, which is probably what I'm going to do next, you know, at the minute when I want to melt a bit of brass or something, like, because I've got another humongous waste oil fired foundry in the container, like just waiting to be used. But the thing is, it's so big, and I never need to melt like 15 kilos of copper. Like, the situation just hasn't arisen, unfortunately. Like, maybe I'm not doing things right if I don't need to melt that quantity of copper. But I mean, that thing's a beast. Like, you know, so I can always turn to that if I've got big things to melt down, and it'll do alley, but it's just a bit dirty. So always avoid it, and it takes a little while to fire it up. This thing, you just plug it in and it starts getting hot, throw some metal in it and walk away from it. Oil is a very much more involved process and very dirty, which, you know, I don't really mind the dirt, but it does start interfering with other things. Like, unless you can, you know, if you're trying to do more than one thing at once, then whatever else you're doing at the time is going to get covered in oil, isn't it? Which is not great. But and then I tried building a micro oil burner, which I did get it running, but it was so bloody temperamental. It just doesn't scale down too well, I think. The big oil burner was pretty easy. And Mr. Oil Burner, he's got a channel, like he's done some really basic builds and some fairly complicated builds, and I checked that out. That's a you know, he's sometimes in the comments down below. Hello, mate. But yeah, he's done hundreds of waste oil burner builds, and, like, you know, got the inspiration, and, you know, warned me about trying small scale oil burners, and they really didn't work too well. So what I'm looking at to do like the bronzes and coppers and that's, you know, because I want to play around and make my own bronzes out of copper. Got loads of copper and loads of alley and that, and I can get some tin. Is perhaps looking at blow lamps and that, you know, trying it with kerosene or jet A1 diesel, whatever, and having a foundry that, because that you can scale right down. You know, everyone's seen those old blow lamps. Yeah, it's still got yeah, a sort of much higher calorific value than the gas, and I might be able to get away without having to use a blower, which is nice, and it'll burn relatively cleanly, and I can make it quite small, so I can actually still use it in the shed in the middle of winter, which is great. That's one of the you know, one of the nicest things about this, isn't it? Because there's no way you can cast in the rain, because like like, apart from the obvious explosion hazards, like when you're dropping hot metal onto a puddle of water, like you can't have your mould getting wet or anything like that. It'll just, you know, you won't get good results. So you know, being in England and not having a covered outdoor shelter, I need something clean enough that I can use it in the shed, you know. So that's that. So those are the three future projects that are gonna be spawned by the death of this deluxe melting pot. So don't be sad that it's going, folks. Be happy that we've learned an awful lot from it, and we'll try and make a few even better things with the knowledge gained from this. And it has been very successful. I've you know, made a few projects, so it's good. And if anyone wants to build something similar, obviously, yeah, check that other video out. See what I did there, and bear what I'm saying now in mind. You know, melting pots only really work if you can handle them easily, and having the ability to change the stainless out, or being able to use a graphite crucible in the first place will, you know, if you could wind your element around the graphite, fantastic. That would work really well, I reckon, and that would, you know, the graphite does erode with the higher temperature metals, but you know, everyone I've spoken to use graphite for the lower, you know, lower melting point metals, aluminium and that. They just last forever, isn't it? They're not consumable. They'll just go forever. If you're only getting them up to 700 degrees C, they'll last very nicely. So yeah, that's probably the way to go, and it might even be what I choose to do in the future. But yeah, anyway, hope you enjoy this. I have a million and one things to do now, so I'm going to throw this out, get this place tidy, and do all my other little jobs and bobs. I'll take it easy, folks. Bye bye.